am Morné Pietersen from Oudtshoorn. I've been born and bred in Oudtshoorn. I'm here for the past 52 years. I only left the town for about 5 years when I studied. I did a degree in science at the University of the Western Cape, came back. I became aware of the fact that things was busy changing in South Africa when I was what we called at that time Sub A, which is today grade 1, at the De Villiers Primary School in Oudtshoorn. And at one of the breaks, we looked into the direction of Morris there, that was sort of a neighboring high school, and we saw smoke. There was protest action. The learners at the school were burning tires, and they were protesting. And that is when I became aware that things were starting to become different in our community. Our teachers and our parents told us that the children were not satisfied with the education system, and they were also not satisfied with the system of racial segregation that was happening in the country, and they were protesting against it. The first protest action in Bridgeton took place shortly after that, from the Congregational Church in Bridgeton towards town. It was led by community leaders, and center in those were Dr. David Pitt. We called him at that time, Meester Pitt. He was one of the local teachers. Him and his brother-in-law, Reggie Olifant, and community leaders, leaders from the Council of Churches in the ministerial attire, were walking in front and leading the march. It was the first time we heard freedom songs being sung. And for me, it was as if there was a different vibration that came from under the surface, as if something that slept woke up. And that was the start of community action in Bridgeton. In center of all of that were Dr. David Pitt. Dr. Pitt was a very strong leader, but he was a responsible leader. He was so responsible that he was I would attribute the fact that, especially here, our country didn't burst out in a bloody civil war, was because of the caliber of leaders of Dr. David Pitt. Because he had the ability to speak out directly to what was wrong, but in such a way that the people that followed him still respected him as Meester. So they would not do things that Meester wouldn't approve. Meester would motivate them to stand up and to speak out, but Meester would never motivate them to burn down or to kill. And I think a lot of people were sort of under that aura of discipline and respect that him as a community leader and an older leader sort of instilled in people. And that was a wonderful way of leading people. He was never seen as we called people in the struggle at that time, that sold out as a pimpy, Ibona pimpy. He was never seen as a pimper. He was always seen as a freedom fighter, a radical activist, but still as a respectful leader, still as a respectful teacher, and was still seen as a respectful father. And I think that was what people, through it all, I mean, there were a lot of decisions that he made, there was a lot of things that he was involved in that everyone wasn't so positive about all the time, but he had the ability to always move them. He had the ability to always entice them with his stories. In his speeches, I know the Alpha Theatre in Bridgeton, it was an old movie theatre. It was one of the biggest halls. The most of the meetings was there. The most of the freedom meetings were there. So we would have masses of people, and the most of the time the meetings was at about 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. Probably because most of the people were not working at that time. That was when they had time for these community meetings. And then Dr. Pitt would be on the stage and he would motivate people. You had what we call the Young Lions. There was a slogan that we had that said, "Roar, young lions, roar." So the Young Lions were there, and the Young Lions sort of were ill-disciplined at times, but they were quickly brought into line by people such as Dr. Piet. So at the one hand, you had all the awareness that took place. You had Saamstaan, you had the community meetings, you had the advice to officers, and then the leadership of Saamstaan. I think Dr. Piet was the chairperson of the Saamstaan organization at that time. And they were towing the way all the time. A lot of the people in the community, because of fear, didn't want to support them. But a lot of the people in the community did support them. And strangely, Oudtshoorn became the center point, especially in the Southern Cape. Strangely, Oudtshoorn was almost the smallest town here in the Southern Cape. But Oudtshoorn was the place where things happened. Oudtshoorn was sort of setting the pace. A lot of the most vocal and strongest community leaders came from Oudtshoorn. The people of Oudtshoorn, and still even today, and this is why we perhaps still sometimes struggle with our local government and management, that the people of Oudtshoorn are very strong thinkers. And a lot of them are not very afraid to say what they mean and to bring out the passion. There's a lot of passionate people, and there's a lot of strong families here. And I think that contributed or attributed to the role that Oudtshoorn played in the liberation struggle. We had meetings with Ellen Busak and the UDF. We had massive UDF meetings here in Oudtshoorn. We had massive meetings of the South African Council of Churches in Oudtshoorn. That were some of the biggest structures where the liberation struggle was sort of hosted, if I could say that, because the ANC was banned. So the organizations that was still legal organizations was the UDF as a civil movement, sort of the Council of Churches as a religious movement, and those were the sort of the structures through which the struggle was sort of kept alive throughout those structures. Oudtshoorn today, and we would still want to believe that Oudtshoorn is a jewel of the Klein Karoo. We that were born and bred in this town would want to believe that this is the place where things happen, where people still dream, where people still live Oudtshoorn, own Oudtshoorn. The KKNK came, I think it was 1995, 96, to the town. And Dr. Piet, at that time, as a strong leader, I think he was at that time already retired school principal, became involved in the negotiations of bringing this community festival to the town. He was, I think he was the first chairperson of the board of the KKNK at that time, I'm not really sure. But he played a very important role in typically negotiating for the whole community. To say, but if we bring this to Oudtshoorn, how will the total community be involved? How will they benefit? How will they own the festival? And I think he succeeded a lot in getting that right, that at this moment the KKNK has been seen as one of the main events on the calendar of Oudtshoorn. The KKNK also allowed the cameras, the eyes of the country and the world to turn towards the town. And suddenly for 8 days in a year, the town would explode with color and arts and diversity and people and entrepreneurship. And the people of Oudtshoorn would be part of the global community for that time in the year. And the town would be filled with excitement, being the host of the people of the world. And if we were to raise a banner, two people that caused this to happen, we would do it to Dr. David Piet. Because I would say that's part of his legacy. The Arts Festival is here, it's an established festival. It has done such a lot for arts, for youth, for business. And today it's established as one of the biggest festivals on the continent. And a tall man, grounded in the soil and born in Oudtshoorn, that passed on, caused all of this. So we are so glad that he could sort of walk alongside Oudtshoorn for a season, that he could allow his shade to fall on us, so that we can still live today and grow under that shade.